Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a file on a figure who, well, didn't just document the American counterculture of the 1960s, he fundamentally engineered its satirical DNA. We are doing a deep dive into Paul Krassner, 1932 to 2019, a man who really transformed comedy into a weapon against censorship. Earned him the title, Architect of Counterculture Satire.
Krassner was absolutely essential. Yeah, he was this intellectual bridge, between highbrow literary tradition and, well, lowbrow political shock.
Right.
He wasn't satisfied just being witty or entertaining. He used shock and humor, not as light relief, but more like surgical instruments, what he called guerrilla journalism.
Guerrilla journalism.
Yeah, designed to cut through societal hypocrisy, challenge established power. I mean, if you really want to understand the anarchic, irreverent core of the 60s, you absolutely have to analyze the material he published and edited in his magazine, The Realist. That was seminal.
And our mission today is precisely that, a comprehensive unpacking of that specific brand of journalism. We want to focus on how Krassner's absolute willingness to publish the unpublishable really shaped an entire era of American political and social thought.
We really have to start, though, by recognizing the tone he set for himself. And interestingly, it was kind of beautifully summarized by his main antagonists.
Oh.
The FBI. They monitored his activities, exhaustively, and they provided the definitive biographical descriptor, officially calling Krassner, and I'm quoting here, a raving, unconfined nut.
Wow. And coming from the FBI, the institution that tracked him, that's like the ultimate badge of honor, isn't it?
Absolutely.
As George Carlin, who, knew a thing or two about necessary disruptions, said when endorsing Krassner, the FBI was right. This man is dangerous and funny and necessary.
Perfect summary.
That single quote just perfectly captures the balance of his influence, right? Funny enough to be popular, but dangerous enough to be feared by the establishment.
Precisely. And his roles all confirm this identity of disruption. Founder and editor of The Realist, launched way back in 1958.
58, okay.
He's famously credited with coining the term Yippie for the political theater group, the Youth International Party.
Right, the Yippies.
And critically, he was the close protege, editor, collaborator of Lenny Bruce, perhaps the most legally persecuted comedian in American history.
So he wasn't just watching the chaos.
No, he was often creating it right from the center.
Okay, let's unpack that. How does a person whose early life seemed geared toward, prestige and quiet achievement end up becoming the FBI's favorite raving nut?
Well, the origin story is it's rich with contradiction. Krassner started out as a true prodigy in the classical arts, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, a child violin virtuoso, skilled enough to perform at Carnegie Hall in New York City in 1939.
Get out. How old was he?
He was 6, a mere 6 years old.
6 years old, performing classical music at Carnegie Hall. That's about as far as you can get from the anti-establishment prankster advocating for, toad slime psychedelics decades later.
Exactly. Polar opposites.
So what happened? What shifted his trajectory so dramatically?
Well, while he had a background in Judaism through his parents, he developed this powerful, lifelong intellectual skepticism. Made a very deliberate personal choice to be secular.
Okay.
He defined religion, with his characteristic cutting wit, as organized superstition. And that skepticism wasn't just, a personal choice. It became the foundation of his journalistic philosophy.
Yeah.
A refusal to accept any narrative, political, social, religious, without rigorous and often shocking scrutiny.
So his path diverged from music into journalism and comedy, the two fields that would eventually merge into The Realist. He studied journalism, you said, Baruch College, then CCNY. Where did he get his initial professional experience, sort of testing those anti-authority muscles?
His professional life started firmly in the anti-censorship camp. He worked for The Independent, important anti-censorship paper back then.
Right.
Rose rapidly, became managing editor, but simultaneously, he was moonlighting. Selling freelance stuff to Mad Magazine.
The Mad Magazine, okay, honing the comedy chops.
Exactly. And he even tried performing. Started stand-up comedy under this fantastic pseudonym, Paul Mall.
Paul Mall, M-A-U-L.
The one.
That captures it perfectly. A mischievous critic. So he's gathering all the tools, journalistic rigor, editorial experience, comedy performance, but realized there was no single outlet for it. Is that right?
Exactly. The transition to founding The Realist in '58 was, in his words, an organic evolution. Born of frustration, really.
How so?
He recognized that while Mad was great satire, it was explicitly aimed at teenagers.
Right, for kids.
There was this desperate need for a satirical magazine aimed squarely at an adult audience.
Hmm.
People who understood politics, philosophy, social nuance. And he dared to mix genuine, deeply researched alternative journalism with cutting humor and, well, grotesque exaggeration.
So intellectually stimulating, politically explosive, morally shocking, all at once.
That was the goal, yeah.
And central to this new style, the enormous looming shadow of Lenny Bruce. How did Bruce specifically influence the DNA of the Realist?
Well, Bruce basically provided the template for public shock as political critique.
Okay.
Bruce was demonstrating on stage that obscenity wasn't just, naughty words. It was a necessary tool to expose societal hypocrisy,
Yeah.
which of course led directly to his repeated arrests.
Right, he was constantly in court.
Constantly. Krassner became Bruce's close protege. He didn't just edit Bruce's controversial autobiography, How to Talk Dirty and Influence People.
Which is a classic title itself.
Isn't it? But he also absorbed Bruce's fearless approach to challenging legal and social taboos.
So Bruce took the fight to the courtroom via the stand-up mic, and Krassner decided to take that same shock tactic and transpose it onto the printed page, giving it permanence, wider distribution.
Precisely. Bruce actually encouraged Krassner to perform his own stand-up, which he did starting in '61 at the Village Gate in New York.
Okay.
But Krassner quickly realized, I think, that the magazine format offered a more effective tool for mass cultural disruption than a stage act. Limited by geography, the immediate presence of police censors.
Right, the printed page could travel.
Exactly. Especially when used for satire and hoaxes. It allowed him to deploy much more calculated and widespread provocation.
Which brings us directly to the Realist and the incredible art of the calculated provocation, the signature move of his guerrilla journalism.
The Realist. Okay, so it began in '58, ran consistently through the '60s, became an essential document of the counterculture. It slowed down later, '70s, '80s, finally published its last issue, number 146, in spring 2001.
Wow, quite a run.
Yeah, and the magazine's enduring power lay in its relentless employment of the put-on.
Okay, before we dive into the specific stunts, let's define that key term for the listener. What exactly is a put-on in the context of Krassner's journalism?
Right, a put-on is basically a tactical journalistic deception,
Okay.
where the writer mixes, say, 90% verifiable, straight fact, or conventional knowledge, with 10% calculated fiction or outrage.
10% fiction, designed to do what?
Specifically designed to expose the belief structures of the reader, or the political system. It's like a method of cultural deprogramming.
How does that work?
Well, if the reader believes the 10% outrage, it proves their assumptions about reality might be based on fear, credulity, or maybe a willingness to believe the worst about authority figures. Krassner mastered this.
And the earliest, maybe most elegant example of this shock technique was that anti-censorship stunt involving just 2 words, launched in '63, right?
Yes, the infamous Affect Communism poster. Red, white, and blue. Framed like a piece of earnest Cold War patriotism. But
With those 2 inflammatory words.
exactly. Linguistic dynamite in the early '60s.
And the critical praise for this was surprisingly highbrow, wasn't it? Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah, Kurt Vonnegut, major literary figure, called it a miracle of compressed intelligence, nearly as admirable for potent simplicity as Einstein's EMC2.
Wow, that's high praise. What was the deep insight Vonnegut recognized there?
Vonnegut saw the brilliance of the political poetry, I think. In the atmosphere of the early '60s, both FC and communism were linguistic landmines. Just saying them could cause trouble.
Right.
Krassner was showing that Americans, gripped by Cold War anxiety and, puritanical moralism, were conditioned to react to both words with the same immediate, unthinking horror, what he called cockamamie Pavlovian fear and alarm.
So by forcing these 2 taboos together,
He revealed the absurdity of the censorship reflex itself. The outrage produced by the poster was doubled, yet it simultaneously kind of zeroed out because the 2 concepts undermined each other. It was genius, really.
and Krassner's guerrilla tactics didn't end with just publishing it. He used the poster to directly challenge the apparatus of censorship itself.
Absolutely. This is where the strategy of the unconfined nut comes in again. Krassner saw being arrested as excellent publicity.
Great free press.
The legendary anecdote is that he took the poster, mailed a copy directly to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover.
No way. To Hoover.
To Hoover himself.
Yeah.
Included a little note saying he hoped Hoover would get a chuckle from the patriotic poster.
Oh my God. He was actively trying to bait the most powerful anti-subversive organization in the country into prosecuting him for obscenity.
Precisely. He calculated that a federal obscenity trial would guarantee massive national publicity for the Realist, transform a niche satirical magazine into a, cause célèbre for freedom of expression.
And did it work?
No. Krassner admitted he was genuinely disappointed when Hoover failed to take the bait. No prosecution resulted.
He was disappointed he didn't get arrested.
Yes, it perfectly demonstrates his radical theory. If you want to be relevant, force the system to react against you. Make them show their hand.
That desire for system reaction, it escalated into his single most notorious stunt, the one that blurred the lines of truth and fiction so effectively, it became the defining example of his metaphorical truth. I'm talking about the Kennedy book hoax of 1967.
Oh, yeah. This came during a period of extreme public scrutiny, regarding the official narrative of the JFK assassination.
Right, lots of conspiracy theories already.
Exactly. William Manchester's authorized account, The Death of a President, was highly anticipated but heavily censored by the Kennedy family. Created this vacuum of distrust. Krassner saw that vacuum and published his satire titled The Parts That Were Left Out of the Kennedy Book.
And the content. It was designed to be the ultimate visceral transgression, wasn't it? Leveraging the deep societal trauma around the assassination and the widespread suspicion of Lyndon B. Johnson.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, shocking piece of grotesque satire. The short narrative climaxed with a graphic description suggesting that then-President Lyndon B. Johnson had, sexually penetrated the bullet hole wound in the throat of JFK's corpse right after the assassination.
Even just hearing that description today is profoundly jarring. How could Krassner possibly justify such extreme content?
His justification, which he reiterated decades later, in '95, was based entirely on this concept of metaphorical truth.
Metaphorical truth, explain that.
He argued the story, while factually untrue, obviously, was a metaphorical truth about LBJ's personality. He wasn't asking people to believe it literally happened.
Okay.
He was using the horrifying image to convey a broader political point about the character of the man leading the country, especially during the escalating Vietnam War.
But the immediate impact was that key political figures, including Daniel Ellsberg, the guy who later leaked the Pentagon Papers, actually believed the incident was factual, that it had been censored by the government. Didn't that suggest the put-on had gone too far? Confusing people rather than clarifying reality.
Krassner viewed that confusion as the desired result, or at least a valuable side effect. He argued that the shocking imagery was necessary because it broke through the notion that the war in Vietnam was being conducted by sane men. His logic was radical. If you are capable of waging an insane, destructive war like Vietnam, you are metaphorically capable of this unthinkable, vile act. The shock forced a cognitive disruption, made people question the moral baseline of their leadership. That was his central goal.
So the mechanism of guerrilla journalism isn't just about printing something controversial. It's about forcing the reader to abandon their assumed reality by confronting them with something so offensive they have to rebuild their context from scratch.
Precisely. And he used other methods, too, to challenge the notion of obscenity itself. In '66, he published the famous Disneyland Memorial Orgy poster, illustrated by Wally Wood.
Oh, yeah, I know that one. All the Disney characters. Not behaving well.
Not behaving well at all. It became this enduring visual icon of counterculture defiance against, manufactured corporate innocence.
And he also deployed the put-on to challenge what was considered appropriate language or subject matter, even if it was scientifically grounded.
Yeah, that's where the highbrow blend gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Also in '66, the Realist reprinted an actual academic medical journal article from the Journal of the American Medical Association.
A real medical article about what?
It's a sober clinical discussion detailing various bizarre foreign objects, tennis balls, drinking glasses, vegetables found in patients' rectums.
Seriously?
Seriously. Krassner published it straight, no commentary, but inserted it into a publication known for satire.
And how did his, supposedly hip counterculture audience react to getting a dry medical report about objects lodged in human orifices?
It provoked outrage among his own subscribers.
No way.
Yeah, they accused him of having a perverted mind. Krassner was delighted, of course.
Yeah.
He proved that even verifiable, clinical, peer-reviewed medical truth could be deemed obscene if presented outside the expected, sterile context of academia. He demonstrated that obscenity resides not in the content itself, but in the context of the delivery and the conditioned response of the reader. Brilliant.
Krassner wasn't content just being behind the editor's desk, though. He was a hands-on activist, helped structure the movements he wrote about. His most lasting contribution to political organization came in '67, co-founding the Youth International Party. and coining the term Yippie.
Right. The Yippies were the ultimate realization of Krassner's philosophy, merging political protest with theatrical, often absurd, humor.
Political theater.
Exactly. They were anarchists who used pranks, cultural disruption, to expose the rigidity of the mainstream political machine. Krassner's foundational role here really solidified his place as a strategic networker within the counterculture.
He also embraced the original figures of prankster activism, right?
Yeah, he was associated with Ken Kesey's Merry Pranksters, which cemented his reputation for combining serious political action with, well, outright outrageous stunts.
Kesey and the pranksters, that's a whole other deep dive, maybe.
Oh, definitely. Later, during the high-stakes trials of the Chicago 7 defendants.
The ones prosecuted for the protests at the '68 Democratic Convention.
That's them. Krassner was listed as a prominent public supporter. He was central to the ideological core of the late 60s protests.
What's fascinating, though, is how he balanced these public theatrical stunts with really high-risk, serious social activism, like his early stance on abortion rights, decades before Roe v. Wade.
This is such a crucial detail, often gets overlooked by focusing just on the stunts. Back in 1962, remember, abortion was illegal, highly dangerous. Krassner published this incredibly courageous piece in The Realist.
What was it?
An anonymous interview with a provider he called Dr. Robert Spencer, who detailed his involvement in performing illegal but crucially safe abortions.
Publishing that back then,
Yeah.
that was a massive legal risk. What were the direct practical consequences for him?
The consequences were immediate and serious. Krassner started getting direct, desperate calls from women, seeking connections to the anonymous Dr. Spencer.
Wow.
So he wasn't just disseminating potentially illegal info. In the eyes of the law, he was potentially aiding and abetting a crime. This led to him being subpoenaed before grand juries investigating abortion crime.
Subpoenaed?
Yeah, this wasn't a joke or a put-on. He put himself in serious legal jeopardy out of a commitment to reproductive health and free information.
So he was willing to go to jail both for the spectacle of obscenity, like the Hoover stunt, and for the genuine principle of providing necessary social information, like the abortion interview.
It shows the breadth of his commitment, absolutely. He also maintained his political convictions through civil disobedience, signed the 1968 Writers and Editors War Tax Protest Pledge.
What was that?
Signatories vowed to refuse tax payments as a protest against funding the Vietnam War. His activism was consistent, but his ability to penetrate the mainstream media sphere was perhaps his most surprising talent.
That's the Krassner contradiction again, isn't it? The radical activist simultaneously earning a living writing for major commercial men's magazines.
He was prolific and highly paid as a freelancer. Throughout the 60s, contributed regularly to Playboy and Cavalier, the dominant men's magazines of the era.
Playboy and Cavalier.
Cavalier recognized his talent, gave him a substantial commitment, paid him $1,000 a month, a generous sum then, to write a column he appropriately titled The Naked Emperor.
The Naked Emperor. Perfect. But what does that relationship tell us? That a leading figure of the counterculture was financially supported by the very establishment he was satirizing.
It speaks to the complexity of the era, I think. The mainstream was starting to embrace or at least tolerate rebellion, as long as it was packaged in an entertaining way.
Okay.
Krassner was smart enough to take the establishment's money while using their platforms to push radical ideas to a massive, mostly conventional audience.
Yeah.
People who would never have picked up The Realist. He was infiltrating from within.
And he also experimented with radio, continuing to use pseudonyms.
He did. Brief but wildly entertaining radio stint in '71, San Francisco, KSFX, an ABC FM affiliate.
And what did he do on air?
Continued his brand of satire, aggressively espoused atheism, all under the gloriously ridiculous pseudonym Rumpelforeskin. Rumpelforeskin.
That is truly peak Krassner. A pseudonym designed to provoke a chuckle, ensure no one took the host too seriously, even while discussing serious ideas.
And that reach extended into the arts world, too. For a truly bizarre cinematic footnote, his legs, just his legs, appeared in John Lennon and Yoko Ono's avant-garde 1971 film Up Your Legs Forever.
Just his legs.
Just his legs. The fact that he was connected enough to global icons like Lennon and Ono to contribute even a small, absurd physical element is pretty telling.
We should also mention his relationship with Mama Cass Elliot, the singer. She clearly saw him as more than just a political provocateur.
Cass Elliot was a profound admirer.
Yeah.
After meeting him with Timothy Leary, apparently she was so taken with his philosophy, she asked him to write the liner notes for her 1968 solo album.
Did he?
He did. She gave him complete freedom,
Yeah.
told him write about the Yippies, write about anything you want. She called him a hopeless idealist.
Hopeless idealist.
Yeah. It underlines the fact that his work resonated deeply with the artistic community. They saw his satirical efforts as part of a larger, maybe spiritual and political quest for liberation.
Okay, so after the height of the Yippie era, Krassner transitions more from primarily being an editor-publisher back into a full-time author, codifying his philosophy, his experiences in a long series of books.
Yeah. He essentially shifted from creating cultural chaos in real time to documenting and analyzing that chaos. His first major compilation of realist material came in '71 with the perfectly Krasnerian title, How a Satirical Editor Became a Yippie Conspirator in 10 Easy Years.
He always did have a knack for descriptive titles, capturing the chaos and contradiction of his life.
Indeed. His 1981 work, Tales of Tung Fu, prime example of his unique style, blending satirical stories with truly wicked social commentary.
Tung Fu.
And of course, the definitive account of his career arrived in 1994, his autobiography, which embraced his official federal designation, Confessions of a Raving Unconfined Nut, Misadventures in Counterculture.
He leaned right into the FBI label.
Absolutely wore it as a badge of honor.
And he also proved that his editorial eye for controversy, his interest in censorship, it never waned, continuing to publish well into the 21st century.
Right. As late as 2009, he published Who's to Say What's Obscene, a collection that revisited the themes that launched his career. Exploring obscenity and modern politics and culture, analyzing how the boundaries of comedy and offense had shifted in the decades since the Realist first started shocking people.
Okay, if we're truly digging into the core philosophy of the counterculture, we have to spend some significant time on his documentation of the psychedelic movement, which he compiled into his specific drug trilogy.
Ah, yes, the drug trilogy. This wasn't just memoir. It was Krassner acting as the archivist of altered consciousness.
Archivist.
Yeah. It showcases his belief that challenging cognitive boundaries was a political and spiritual act, just as important as challenging legal boundaries.
Let's break down the trilogy. The first volume focused on the most common counterculture drug.
Plot Stories for the Soul, published in 1999, focused on marijuana. Interestingly, this volume was mostly a compilation, stories and anecdotes gathered from other authors, establishing a shared cultural history around cannabis use. Krassner was providing the editorial framework for collective experience.
Okay, so curating other stories there. The second volume saw him return to his own voice, focusing on the quintessential psychedelic of the 1960s.
Paul Krassner's Psychedelic Trips for the Mind, 2001, written entirely by Krassner himself, concentrated specifically on LSD experiences. This was a deep, personal dive into the psychological, social implications of acid use as a tool for radical thought, perception shift.
And the final volume, this one reveals his commitment to chronicling the entire, sometimes bizarre, pharmacological landscape of the era.
Magic Mushrooms and Other Highs from 2004, highly eclectic. It dealt with the traditional psychedelics, magic mushrooms, peyote, mescaline, but also covered THC, opium, cocaine, and a whole litany of more obscure yet culturally significant mind-altering substances.
Let's list those out because it really gives you a sense of the comprehensive nature of his interest here.
Okay. He covered ayahuasca, which was gaining prominence even then,
Yeah.
belladonna,
Mhm.
ketamine,
Yeah.
PCP, STP, and yes, the most sensational entry, toad slime,
Toad slime, seriously.
which refers to the psychoactive properties of bufotenin found in the secretion of certain toads.
Wow. Okay. What's fascinating here is that Krassner wasn't just compiling a list for shock value, was he? He was treating the entire spectrum of consciousness alteration as a critical field of study for understanding the human mind and subsequently challenging societal control.
Absolutely, that's the key. To him, the personal psychological journey facilitated by these substances was a form of political defiance. If you truly alter your perception of reality, the government's reality, its war policies, its social controls, becomes instantly questionable. It was a form of chemically assisted guerrilla journalism aimed at the self.
Krassner's career left behind this paper trail of awards and recognition, but they reveal a man caught between wildly conflicting ideological camps. This is perhaps the most insightful part of his legacy.
Right. The contradictory nature of his recognition is, breathtaking. It speaks to his unique ability to appeal to multiple audiences simultaneously. He is the only person documented to have won major awards from both Playboy magazine,
Okay.
for his biting satire, and the Feminist Party Media Workshop, for his journalism.
That is an immense ideological split contained within one career. Playboy and a Feminist Party workshop. How did he manage to bridge that massive gap?
It seems to boil down to his unwavering dedication to freedom of expression. Playboy valued his ability to challenge prudishness, government interference. The Feminist Party valued his willingness to publish taboo and necessary information, like that abortion interview back in '62.
So his commitment to process the free flow of information was sometimes strong enough to overcome ideological differences in content.
It seems that way, sometimes.
And his radical credentials, they remained entirely intact, verified by the counterculture itself.
Oh, no question there. In 2001, he was the first living man inducted into the Counterculture Hall of Fame. The ceremony took place at the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam.
Fitting.
Very fitting. He also received high praise from the establishment he often fought, like the ACLU Uppie Award for dedication to freedom of expression. And thanks to his collaboration with Bruce, he secured a Grammy nomination in 2005 for Best Album Notes. For the definitive box set, Lenny Bruce, let the buyer beware.
Yet, despite this high praise, particularly from that feminist group, Krassner, like many prominent male figures on the left at the time, was the subject of severe and, frankly, legitimate criticism from the rising feminist movement. It suggested that his zeal for shock often crossed the line into blatant misogyny.
This is a crucial area. We have to address it impartially because it reveals the core conflicts within the counterculture itself. In 1970, writer and activist Robin Morgan published her landmark manifesto, Goodbye to All That, and she explicitly called out Krassner's problematic actions and rhetoric.
Okay, so if we look specifically at Morgan's critique, what was the primary intellectual failure she identified in Krassner's thinking?
Morgan pointed directly to his confusion over feminist anger. She cited his astonished anger that women have lost their sense of humor on this issue, the issue being sexual objectification and degradation.
The classic can't you take a joke defense.
Essentially. Morgan's central point was that Krassner failed to distinguish between satire directed at systemic power, the FBI, LBJ and satire, that reinforced existing oppression against marginalized groups, specifically women.
And what were the specific examples of Krassner's material that Morgan used to illustrate this failure?
She presented several examples to back up her claim of his inherent sexism within the movement. She cited his promotional poster for an aerosol can called Instant Pussy.
Oof.
Yeah. His monthly column for what she called the woman-hating men's magazine Cavalier, and perhaps most damagingly, his alleged dream of a rape-in against legislators' wives.
Oh, rape-in.
Yeah. The implication was that he used sexual violence as a shocking comedic tool, directing it at women who were not the source of the political problem.
And I recall she also called out a very specific, deeply ingrained instance of male chauvinism within the movement itself, which Krassner apparently participated in.
Yes, Morgan criticized him for engaging in what she dubbed the locker room tradition. She accused Krassner of listing, quote, in alphabetical order, the names of women in the movement he has fucked.
Oh, wow.
As a way of proving he was no sexist oppressor. This critique powerfully illustrated that even figures championing liberation against the state could simultaneously perpetuate oppressive behaviors within their own radical circles.
It's the ultimate essential counterbalance to his legacy of liberation, isn't it? It proves that fighting government censorship doesn't grant you immunity from reinforcing social oppression.
That tension between radical political freedom and necessary social responsibility is what makes Krassner such an enduring, complex subject of study. He was a product of his time, using every tool available to shake the system, but, yeah, sometimes failing to see how those tools might harm his allies.
And just on a final note regarding his personal life, he had 2 marriages, first to Jean Johnson. They had 1 daughter, Holly, later to Nancy Kane. He eventually retired from the constant churn of publishing, moved to Desert Hot Springs, California in 2002, passed away there in 2019 at 87 following a neurological disease.
So to synthesize Krassner's unique function, he was a master of weaponizing shock and humor, breaking through political and social taboos. His mission wasn't just to entertain, it was to force official reactions like the FBI calling him a nut or getting subpoenaed that would ultimately reveal the structural hypocrisy and absurdity of the system he was fighting.
And that function, that guerrilla journalism, remains profoundly relevant to you, the listener, today. Krassner taught a generation to distrust official narratives, to recognize metaphorical truth. In an age defined by nonstop conflicting narratives, deep fakes, the ability to spot the put-on, to know where the 90% fact ends and the 10% calculated fiction begins, that's a critical survival skill.
He taught us that sometimes the most grotesque or unbelievable story is the one that forces us to question the entire context of our reality. He perfected the art of generating outrage strategically to serve a larger, necessary philosophical point.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to explore. building directly on Krassner's methods. His success was really predicated on a fundamental constraint, the existence of censorship, the legal threat of being arrested for obscenity, which he actively sought to gain publicity.
Right. Today, in our hyper-digital world,
Yeah.
where everything is instantly printable, tweetable, live-streamed, where that legal shock barrier Krassner valued barely exists anymore, no authority can truly stop a widely shared image. What is the modern equivalent of obscene? What can a satirist still use to effectively challenge power?
Yeah. If the satirist can no longer rely on the threat of jail time to prove their seriousness and gain attention, how can they generate that system-disrupting attention? Attention that can't simply be scrolled past or ignored? How does the raving, unconfined nut thrive when there are maybe no constraints left to truly rail against in the same way?
It might require a new form of digital guerrilla journalism, aimed perhaps not just at the government, but at the mechanisms of attention and belief itself. Something to think about.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the complex, shocking, and ultimately necessary world of Paul Krassner. We'll see you next time.